I'm Stroop. I'm here to talk about League of Legends and the bottom lane. This is a tutorial video, mostly for people who don't know about the game, or people who might want to get into it, or maybe want to refresh their memory. Now the bottom lane has two roles that go down. The bottom lane gets two roles. They get the ADC, or marksman, as Riot calls it, and the support. And the job of the marksman or ADC is to carry team fights in the mid to late game. They are very important in your team. You want to keep them alive, and you want them to get strong. You want them to grow, and you nurture them. They're like babies. In the beginning of the game, they're very weak, and they can't do anything except farm minions. Now, these two characters go into the bottom lane. They farm minions. Most of the early game, if you are the ADC, what you want to do is be always farming minions, and you want to pay attention to their health bars. Always last hit them. You want the gold and experience you need to level up and get gold. You get gold by getting the last hit and killing minions. One big tip that a lot of people give is to play custom games and literally just spend the whole time farming minions and practicing last hitting, because you should get a practice for it. Now, the support's job, it's pretty self-explanatory. The support supports the ADC. That can be done in a variety of ways, from healing, providing extra damage, buffs, utility, vision. There's many things that supports can do, and in that way that they have more variety than an ADC does. And many ADCs are very similar in gameplay. You use your auto attacks from a range. Now, it is possible to play a melee person in the bottom lane, and honestly, you could play more than just marksman. One of my favorite things about League of Legends is the freedom they give you. League gives you a lot of freedom, and you are allowed to pick nearly any character and go any lane. It doesn't always mean you should, but the freedom is there, and I think that it's underappreciated. The meta, it's a tool. Go play who you want to play. Experiment. And that goes for items too, not just characters. Although I guess I should say that in these cases you probably want to play with friends, just so that you don't run into trolls and people who get mad at you. An important thing to keep an eye on is the minions as the ADC. And the support generally has a support item that allows them to also get a few minion kills and still allow their ADC to get gold. And then in some cases, when the minions are under tower, the melee minions will take, I believe, 3 hits to go down. If a melee minion takes 1 tower hit, they will have about half of their health left. And then if it takes a second hit, it'll have about a sliver of health, and you'll be able to take that in 1 auto attack. So the melee minions, you can wait 2 hits before you can take them down. The caster minions, the ones that attack you from a range, those ones will actually die in 2 hits. If they take 1 hit, it'll put them at a little more than a sliver. If you're in a call with your support, you can have your support deal 1 hit before they take their first tower hit, and then it will leave them with just enough health for you to get a kill on the minion. This is something you should practice in custom games. Again, farming under tower is extremely difficult, not recommended unless you have practiced and you're a pro. Generally, what you want to do, you want to avoid farming under your tower, and you want to get your minions and the enemy minions about right in front of your tower, right here. You want to freeze the wave right here. Now, freezing the wave essentially means you have to carefully manipulate the minions. You want to only take the last hit of the minion and deal as little damage to the minions as possible. The enemy minions will push into your wave. And if you're playing, if you're very new to the game, it's very common that the other team will attack your minions regularly, so it shouldn't be too hard to get them to push you. But once they start pushing, you want to freeze it here. You want to farm right near your tower, but not quite under it. And when that happens, if you are over here and they move forwards to about here, they are in a prime spot to be ganked by the jungler, your jungler. So your jungler can come in from behind and wipe them out if they're too far ahead, because it's very difficult for them to escape. Even if they escape and they use their flash or heal, wasting their flash or heal is still very useful. Just remember that you've done that, because the flash and heal will come back up later, but it's got a long enough cooldown that if your jungler ganks a second time, they won't be able to escape. And a lot of people make mistakes in League, and you need to take advantage of that in order to win. It's all about taking advantage of the enemy's mistakes, finding openings in their defense, and paying attention to the map. Now I've got this map here. I've got this here because the map is the most important part of the game for any role. This is the key to the game. I think that a lot of people, especially newer players, just they completely miss warding and vision, because I think what separates a pro player from a noob is warding and vision. A common mistake is to ward in this bush here, and you might think that makes sense because it's in the bush, but if you think about it, how much time does that give you? If the enemy jungler is coming in, I guess just in this case, just pretend that this is the enemy jungler, you will only see them until they get to about this bush, and the jungler comes in. You'll only see them till they get here, and that's very close. That's too close. In many cases, junglers can move fast. They've got abilities to gank. They'll mess you up, so they're gonna get to you even if you saw them coming. A Rammus is very fast. He will run into you and he'll get you. A much better place to ward is, depending on where you are in your lane. If you've pushed up, okay, you want to ward further into the river, because that gives you a much earlier lookout. Okay, you'll be able to catch them quicker. They won't make it to you. You'll be able to escape. And then in some cases, you'll be against people who go invisible, and in that case, you really want to pay attention to your map. If you saw the jungler ganking in mid, and you saw them leave and go this way, if you saw them with full health, they could be coming for you. Even if they're not coming for you, you are absolutely safer off just going back and not pushing so hard. Which is why it's very important to have your minions and the enemy minions here, just in front of your tower, but not quite at your tower. I think I mentioned earlier that yes, the bottom lane has two roles, and there's actually a reason why. Something really important for the bottom lane and for any lane is the dragon. The dragon is one of the objectives to get during the game, and it's a neutral objective, which means it doesn't belong to either team. There's the dragon, there's red buff. Each team has their own buff, but any team can take it. See, the bottom side of the map here has their red buff down here and their blue buff up here, and the top side has the red buff here and their blue buff here. Now, taking dragon is extremely important because getting multiple dragons gives your team huge buffs. It can make or break a game. Now, because two people go down in the bottom lane, and that's where the dragon happens to be, it actually gives you an advantage. Well, not necessarily over the enemy team, but you have the advantage in contesting dragon. Because if you think about it, having 2 people down here as opposed to just 1 will make it easier and give you more chances to take dragon instead of just having 1 person down here. Now, there is actually an objective near the top lane. However, the very important objective, Baron Nashor, Baron, only spawns at something like 20 minutes into the game. But before Baron spawns, there is a monster here that you can contest and get, but it's not quite as big of a deal as getting dragons. Okay. Now, as I mentioned before, minions are very important. Okay. Minions are important for the ADC specifically because the ADCs, they scale way better off of items and gold than they do leveling up. ADCs will attack with their auto attacks most of the time. Some of them will cast abilities to do damage, but the majority of their damage is in their auto attacks. And because of that, they scale better with items. So you want to get as much gold as you can. And some people might think that that means going for kills and getting kills and fighting the enemies here. But 1 minion wave is worth more than you might think. While going for kills is nice, think of that as more of a bonus. Okay, think of minions first, kills second. But if you see somebody low enough and you see an opportunity to go in and kill them, as long as you check the mini-map here and you make sure that, as long as you check this and make sure that no junglers are nearby, like if you have seen that mid is in mid, top is in top, and the jungler is ganking up top, if you see that they've pushed up enough up here and maybe they're low, or you have a support that has an ability to go in on them, you should take those opportunities. But make sure to pay attention to level difference, gold difference, item difference. If they have a higher lead than you and they have full health and you have full health, you want to stay back. Or if your jungler's coming in, like right here, he's already drawn, but that's a good chance to get a kill. That's when you want to go in. You want to pay attention to opportunities, because I think I said before, opportunities is how you win. What happens if a team fight is happening in the mid lane? Everyone but you and 4 of you are your teammates. 4 of them are up here, and the entire team, the enemy team, is up here, right? And they're all up here. Some people would think, okay, where do I go? Do I leave bottom lane and assist them? Or do I keep pushing and farming this lane? There's actually context that you need to pay attention to. If you notice that the team fight has already started, or if you look at it and decide, okay, is my team losing or winning in this fight? If your team is losing, do not even bother. Stay in your lane and get the gold, because if you start walking up here and they're dying, you're only going to get picked off too. You're going to get killed just as much as them. Now, if they haven't even started a fight yet, and your team is here and their team is here, now think of, if that's happening, think about your minions here. What's going on down here? Are the minions pushed all the way up to the tower? If that's happening, you probably want to join the team fight, because it's very hard to farm under tower, and you can try to take the tower. In the very early game, what you want to do is you probably want to take an armor or armor plate off of the tower. In this case, 1 or 2 armor plates, and then go up and start the team fight, because in any trade with the enemy, whether it's objectives or poking, with any trade, you want to get more out of it than them. And that means taking opportunities. If you don't see anybody in a lane and you know that they're too far away to deal with it, you want to take those opportunities. But Generally, as an ADC in like early game and early mid game, you want to focus on farm. Your time to shine is late game and mid game. Of course, that varies by champion. Some champions will do significantly better mid game, or significantly better late game. So that could be up to your team composition, the character you're playing. But in many cases, you want to focus on getting farm. Number 1, if you don't see anywhere to be, the minions are pushed all the way up to the tower, you can't defend it, start taking jungle camps. Okay, start looking at the map. Look at the map, see where the enemy is. Look at the timer for the objectives for the Baron and Dragon and the buffs, and pay attention to when they're coming up. If Dragon's coming up soon and you see the team fights up top, absolutely go for Dragon, because Dragon's very important. So I've been talking a lot about early game, mid game, and late game. So that's something I think that not everyone commonly knows the difference. So early game, I think, is obvious. Early game is when you're farming in lane and the game has just started. You walk into your lane, or you finish leashing your jungle. I can explain leashing in really quickly, but at the beginning of the game, your jungler will start at a camp, preferably either the red buff or blue buff, either in the top or bottom, or here or here, one of these 4 areas. And many junglers have a hard time taking that at the very beginning of the game. So the laners will generally help them take that and then walk away and go into their lane. Once you get into your lane, you farm, you get into specific positions, you let your jungler gank, maybe not, or you pay attention to when the enemy jungler is ganking. Once you reach level 6, there's a big power spike in many champions that will allow you to make plays and get kills. Once you've destroyed a tower, once any team has destroyed a tower, the power balance starts to shift. Not just in the lane that the tower was destroyed in, but in the entire game, okay? Now, if you lose your tower, just as an example, okay? If you lose your tower, you lose vision in this whole area, okay? You lose vision, and the enemy is able to push further than they were before, or in some cases, even though they've destroyed your tower and your vision, pushing further into the lane can be difficult for them because of the fact that they can be ganked so much easier, because in most cases the enemy team won't have vision in your side of the jungle. And so it's very helpful in these cases for the enemy team to, once they've destroyed a tower, they've got power in this lane, they've got strength, they can actually go into other lanes and gank without fear of losing this tower, because they've pushed hard enough that there's leeway. They've pushed all the way to maybe here, or up to the tower, maybe a little bit past it. That gives them the opportunity to gank in mid or top, and they might not even lose out on farm. They might, won't even lose out on map presence. And that's about when mid game starts. When one tower is destroyed, or when people start leaving their lanes and there's a power balance shift, that is mid game. Okay, that's when team fights might start happening, and you want to pay attention to the entire map. And being in your lane at this point doesn't matter. What matters is getting experience, gold, kills, objectives. You no longer focus on your lane, and you focus on the entire map. You figure out where you want to be, and you go there. Generally, you start making plays, trying to get dragons, trying to get objectives, Baron. Maybe not this early game, but... So yeah, this is mid-game. Mid-game is once you start roaming and going to other lanes, and at least one lane has taken a tower, that's mid-game. Now late game is a little bit harder to pinpoint, I guess, because late game is more about death timers. Once an inhibitor is taken, the power balance shifts even more, okay? Because now the enemies can get into your base. And if the timer has reached far enough into the game, the death timers will be significantly long enough that if your team dies in a team fight, the game's over. In the late game, one team fight decides the entire game, because even if you have all your inhibitors, even if you have 2 towers in your lane, if the death timers are long enough and one team fight happens, then they can easily push and just end the game, because your whole team can't defend and you're dead. And it gets even worse if they have a Baron buff. If they have a Baron buff, they'll just easily rush in, because the Baron buff boosts nearby ally minions. Late game is all about team fights. Late game is just sticking with your team. I'm going to explain where the ADC wants to be in a team fight, okay? Imagine a team fight's happening in mid. Their tank is up front, okay? That's how they generally want their game to be. You want your tanks to be up front. I think that's fairly obvious. You want them to soak up damage. You want them to absorb hits. The ADC, if you die, especially as the ADC, because the ADC provides the most damage in late game, you don't want to die. You don't want to die because your team might not be able to fight without you. Alright? As the ADC, you want to be close enough that you can deal damage, but far enough that they can't easily get you. Now what that means is it's not always about distance, but it's about positioning. I know that sounds like the same thing, but thinking about it this way, if your tank is up here and your tank is like in between the team, you can actually stand right behind your tank and generally be okay. Depending on the enemy team, you can stand behind your tank as the ADC and be okay. But if your tank is not further up, you want to stay back further. You want to position yourself based on your team and the enemy team. Alright? You do not want to stay alone. You want people peeling for you, which means that they are pulling the enemies off of you. So if the enemy is chasing you, your support can stun them, lock them, stop them from moving, and you can get away, or use that potential stun to do extra damage to them. So as an ADC, you probably want to be right about here. You want to be right here. Excuse me. You want your tank to be here. You want maybe a bruiser, or you want maybe not somebody who's tankier but not the tankiest to be right about here. There's almost like an order of engaging, okay? You want your tanks to be up front, and then the less tanky they are at the back, the further back, and then behind that would be specific mages that have long range. Somebody like, well, I can't really think of an example at the moment, but there are some mages that have extreme range, and you can have them really far back, but they can still do team fights. All right, and then off to the side here, you might have your jungler or your assassin character, because there are assassins in League, and their goal is basically to do cleanup. They run in, use their abilities, and get out, okay? They're very, very squishy. Assassins are the squishiest characters. The moment they take a hit, they are dead. They die. Now, as the ADC, you're very squishy as well. Generally, ADCs have range, so you don't have to be as close as assassins do. So assassins generally have lots of movement. So they'll be able to jump in, deal damage, and then get right back out. And in many cases, they want to jump in and get a kill and get out. So what you want to do as the ADC is you want to whittle them down because you do consistent damage. You want to whittle them down and stay behind your team and make sure to not be alone. Pay attention to where the enemy is at all times. If there's an enemy up here, you want to reposition yourself to be maybe down here. Sometimes you might want to be a little bit further away from the enemy than your auto attack range or your ability range. But that's fine because staying alive is very, 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 very important in late game. If you see a team fight happening, many times it's hard to see the outcome. But what you want to do is if a team fight's happening, try to deal damage. Throw everything you can and throw it on their damage dealers, their squishiest damage dealers, okay? Try not to focus the tanks, but in many cases you might have to. If you're fed enough, attacking the tanks is a good option because you'll be able to do enough damage, consistent damage, to take out the tank. But if you're not fed enough and you can't take out the tank, you might want to try targeting a much squishier person in the back. So in this case, if this enemy's not here, their whole team's up here, and your tank like maybe engages on that tank, try to go around and attack the ADC, the mage, maybe their assassin, take them out, and then if you take out their main damage, their tank can't do anything. Even if it takes a while to kill their tank, they cannot kill the whole team. They can soak up damage, but that's it. Now, I think that's about it for team fights. So let's go back to the bottom lane for a minute and imagine we're back in early game. So I think I said before that ADCs scale off of their items, which means that when you buy items that have attack damage, attack speed, you get big buffs. That's where your power spike comes in. So you have to think about what you're buying when and what the enemy has. Okay, if the enemy has a full item built, they can be scary. All right, in the early game, if they have a full item and you don't have a full item, that's a big power spike. You want to stay away from them. Even if you have a higher level, the chances of you winning are low. But if they have low health, pay attention to the circumstances. Pay attention to what's going on, the map. Many ADCs buy different items. Really hard to talk about specifics, but right now I believe the item shop has changed and I don't know a whole lot about it. I've got the item shop open here. There's many tools for an early beginner. The game itself recommends items for your character, and it will, even now it's a new update, it'll actually recommend items based on who you're going up against as well as who you're playing as and how the game's going. But there's many third-party tools and websites, but I don't condone downloading third-party tools that change your client or your game, because I believe those are break like terms of service or break like whatever it is that you accept when you start playing League. But using a third-party website, I believe is perfectly okay. Just be aware of where you're placing your information on the internet. Don't go sharing personal details to random places. Most of these websites you won't need to sign in. Many of them offer guides and builds. Generally, the game will give you tips on what to buy, but as an ADC, you want to buy attack speed, attack damage, crit chance, lifesteal, depending on how your game's going. It wouldn't necessarily hurt to buy things like armor, only because in some cases, well, actually, like in most cases, in your lane, you'll be taking physical damage because you're against another ADC. Now, in some cases, ADCs can do magic damage, but in most cases, they'll be doing physical damage. So you will want to buy damage almost all the time. You'll want to buy damage. In very small cases, you can buy items that have armor. The Death Stance, for example, gives you armor, attack damage, and ability haste. Ability haste is something new. It allows you to cast your spells faster. It reduces the cooldown on your abilities. The Death Stance reduces physical damage dealt to you, which means it'll be much easier for you to deal with the damage that the enemy is doing. If the enemy is ahead of you and they're doing better, they have more items, you should buy items that will counter their item. You can see the items that they buy if they're on your screen. You can click on the enemy and you can, on the top left, you'll be able to see the items that they buy. Use that to your advantage. If they're buying, strong AD and they're not buying armor penetration ignores armor. So does lethality. Lethality also ignores armor. If they have those, try not to rely so much on armor. But if they don't have those things, a little bit of armor wouldn't hurt. You always want to try to buy damage, attack speed, and crit. And that's the 3 stats you want to get. Again, I said before at the beginning of this video, League of Legends allows for a lot of customization or freedom. So you can buy any item that you want. I don't care what items you buy. If you believe it works, go for it, okay? Just as long as you know that your team, if you pick an item that you know is not meta, or you know that other people aren't normally taking, make sure that your team knows, or play with your friends. Leave a comment in the bottom under this video and let me know if there's something I missed about ADCs. Okay, I'm gonna talk about supports now. So the support's job is to support. Support should always be with another person. But that does not always mean the ADC. If your ADC is gone, if your ADC is farming alone, or if you see a better opportunity, if there's a team fight happening in mid, almost always go to that. As a support, you want to be in many more team fights than your ADC is. In early game, at least. In early game and mid game. You want to be in every team fight because the support is key. Support heals and provides things for your team that in early game, the ADC cannot do as well. They can't do enough damage in many cases. You really want to stick with your teammates as a support. If you're playing as a tanky support, you want to stay in front of your team. If you're playing as a squishy support like Sona that deals damage, you want to stay pretty far back. So in this case, if this were the ADC, this would be the support right here. If you were playing as Sona or whatever the new one is, Seraphine, you'd want to stay back here. Damage isn't priority. Priority for damage, ADC. They're the ones that deal damage. You can heal, buff, speed them up, do whatever you need to do from behind. But if you see everyone going in and you see that the enemy is attacking the tank and you are the support, that would be your opportunity to use your big moves. Like, the supports generally have game-changing moves and for team fights. Sona has a stun that can stun an entire team. People like Braum has a big knock-up, can knock up pretty much the whole team, or maybe 1 or 2 people. You want to get them when they're least expecting it. You want to get them when their attention is shifted, okay? Don't just throw out your ults willy-nilly as any character, especially as a support. You want to make sure that you can land your abilities. The support items, again, the items were changed recently, so it's really hard to say what to buy on supports, but it mostly depends on what your team needs, what your character is. Many supports are AP or tanky. There are some AD supports, but in most cases, if, let's say, your top lane is somebody that's very tanky, okay, and your jungle is also someone that's very tanky, in most cases, if you are a support, you most likely won't need to go tanky. Try to build for more damage, whether that's AD or AP. If your team does not have any tanks, even if you're somebody like Sona, go fairly tanky, okay? Because tanks are important. You need a tank on a team. Pretty much just buy what your team needs, okay, as a support, because your job is providing for the team. So if they need damage, buy damage. If they need tank, buy tank. I might make a separate video going over items as a whole, but for now, I think that's about it for this video. If I've missed anything and you want me to talk about something in my next video, leave a comment down below, subscribe, because I will make more League of Legends content, or I'll make more memes or whatever I want to make. Honestly, I'll just make whatever I want on this channel. But, you know, leave suggestions down below, and I'll try to get to you. I will get to every comment I can. Good night.